Hello and welcome back. I'm super thrilled to welcome Michael, Learning and Development Manager, Chair of the ICQB Advanced Work Group, author and international keynote speaker, and today also a speaker at the A4Q Testing Summit. We're super excited to have you here. In his talk, The Awkward Truth of Software Quality, Michael takes a hard look at the recurring cycle of hype and disillusionment in the industry. And drawing on an Empirical's research, he questions what really improves software quality and what doesn't. So, Michael, I'm very, very interested to hear what the awkward truth is. And the stage is yours. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Elena. So, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining the A4Q Testing Summit and, of course, for attending this specific session. And also a warm thank you to Elena for the excellent introduction. As said, I'm Michael. I've been in the software industry for over 2 decades, working in very different roles for very different types of businesses. Suffice to say that I've seen the best and the worst in software development. But these kind of stories are better shared at the bar than during a virtual conference. But feel free to reach out to share some stories regarding quality and testing and all that stuff afterwards with me. What I want to do today is to share some of my stories with you, and especially those related to quality. Because over the years, I've seen a lot of organizations suffering with proper quality, and I've also witnessed them undertaking all kinds of initiatives to improve that magical term of quality. And that's a struggle, a real struggle to actually improve the quality of the products you're developing. Let us first start by determining a definition of the word quality. What is quality? Well, in my experience, dependent of who you talk to, you might get a different answer or even a completely different answer. One aspect of quality can be whether a project or a product is delivered within budget. Typically, your project sponsor will think that is the main effect of quality. On the other hand, maybe your PM has a different idea. That is delivered on time. Will we have released the product on time? Maybe there are some tight deadlines due to legal constraints or to whatever is necessary for the organization because a competitor is doing something. Then that is the most important part of quality. Maybe it's because it's according to the scope. Have we developed everything which has been promised to our customers? Can be another aspect of quality. Maybe we can relate quality to ISO 25010, the quality standard for software engineering and software products. Functionality, usability, performance, all these abilities and quality aspects, maybe that's the pure definition of quality that for you embodies quality on itself. Maybe it is when the product is verified, when a testing professional or a QA ninja has looked at the software and has verified all the requirements. Then at that point in time, we have determined quality, yes or no. Or when it's been validated by the end users or by their proxies, by the product owners, then we consider something to be qualitative. Or is it a combination of all of the above? Suffice to say, there's a lot of different interpretations regarding quality. So if your goal is to improve quality, well, your first step is to clearly define what quality is within your organization, between your team. Now, let's take one step back. Let's say that you are the new project manager, test coordinator, product owner, sponsor, whatever for a team delivering software. And your primary task that you have been assigned to is to increase the quality of the software. So you are now in the lead, you're in the driver's seat and you have carte blanche. You can undertake whatever you want. What would you do? What actions would you implement? What would you invest in order to achieve whatever quality definition you have defined? Are you going to try to achieve quality by adding resources to the project to make sure it's been delivered on time? Are you going to implement some agile framework? Save, Less, Nexus, Spotify, because you heard all kinds of good stories about that working in distributed teams. Or you go for some DevSec, whatever ops, FinOps, to go to pipeline, CI/CD, whatever. Or are you going for some multi-level automation framework with both the GUI and the UI and the code being automated, all linked to each other? Is that your idea on how you can improve the quality of the software? Or you go for some modeling approach, BPMN, UML, classes, whatever you can think of? Is that your approach? Or are you reverting to AI? Or is it back to the basics with pair programming, pair testing, pair everything? So you have a lot of possibilities here. And depending on where you're coming from, you're reluctant or not reluctant at all to choose one of those or many of those. But again, you're in the driver's seat. What would you select? Take a moment to think about it while we continue. Because you might have your own opinion about what is the best way forward to improve quality of a product or a process or a project. But how can you make sure you make the right choice? Presumably, all the ideas mentioned before are good or even excellent ideas. But you, in your career, haven't made it this far in that career by just guessing, by just using your gut feeling. You want to select the best options. You want to implement the best options. So how do you do that? How do you select from the entire scope that you have of improvement suggestions? How do you know what the best choices are? Or maybe even what are the choices? Is it an exhaustive list of choices that you have or not? When it comes down to determining your choices, there's a lot of information out there. There's a wealth of knowledge right there at your fingertips, even now more than before, because it was never so easy to find information. In these AI-driven times, a critical voice towards any thought is recommended, because it's not only AI that sometimes hallucinates. So whatever tool that you use, whatever source of information that you use, whether these are international standards, ISO, IEEE, BS, whatever you can think of, look critically. Whether it's about books that you read, whether it's about articles that you consult, websites that you read, blogs that you read, keynotes that you attend to, trainings that you follow, workshops that you attend, all of that can be valuable information. But again, take a look at it carefully and always remember you're a tester. You won't have that critical voice. But this is the source of your information if you're going for quality improvement. But all these sources, these oracles of information, might give you some potential ideas to implement in order to try to improve that software quality. But typically, if you want to initiate an improvement track, some sort of managerial type, typically called a sponsor, would like to have some business case, balancing the potential benefits and the drawbacks, opportunities versus risks, cost and potential gains. So how do you know which techniques might work, which tools might work, which options might work, and which don't? How can we predict the outcome of these uncertain endeavors? One way of doing that is to consult the experts. But you know what's so special about experts is that experts typically disagree because they only became experts by being opinionated. And if one expert just repeats the opinion of another expert, well, that one expert is not considered an expert anymore. You have automation experts, you have AI experts, you have methodology experts, and they all see different things. They might have a common ground, but when it comes to actually giving you the best advice, they will speak for their own company, for their own business. So experts may be not the best source of inspiration. The second thing is using our own experience. Now, the issue with our own experience, even though you're 10, 15, 20, 25, 40, whatever years in the business, is that your experience is both biased and limited. No one, not anyone in this audience, has tried and compared everything. What might work in situation A might not work in situation B, and vice versa. So it's quite easy to think I can extrapolate whatever I've done before. I can use the same tools, the same approach, the same things I tried. That might not work. So an example that let's BDD the hell out of something might be a great idea if you start from scratch, but not if you have millions of lines of code that are there as legacy. And those lines of code which are legacy are typically also poorly documented. So just counting on your gut feeling, on your experience, because I've done this before, is not achievable. So no experts, not your own experience. So what is there? Well, we might use questionnaires. Let the people bottom up answer things. Now, the issue with questionnaires and with that approach is that there's a huge difference between popularity and effectiveness. If I would ask my colleagues what measure would affect their happiness at work the most, it's quite probable that they would opt for a higher salary or for more holidays or for both. But unfortunately, salary raises are not very effective in terms of retention. In fact, a salary raise is not efficient in terms of retention. It has even a negative effect on retention. Typically, in daily business, something popular is not likely to be effective. And on the other side, if something is effective, typically it's not popular. It's an actual catch-22. So even with a questionnaire, you might not get the answers you actually need. You might get the answers you want. So it's not the experts, it's not your own opinion, it's not power bottom up of the masses. What we are missing when we have to make a decision regarding which things to implement when trying to achieve quality is scientific study, is empirical research. It's hard data, hard facts, evidence, academia steered. So what I tried to do for this presentation is I dove into quite a few academic studies. When they are applicable, you also see the reference to the study at the bottom of each of the slides, so feel free to investigate further on the topics that interest you. I just gave the study and the author of the study as reference for you. So let's take a look. Why do we want to do this? Because contrary to popular belief, certain of the must-haves when coming down to improving quality have absolutely no positive effect at all on software quality. Contrary to what experts might say and books might say, evidence-based, certain of these initiatives have no positive effect. Let's give some examples here. Let's start by the Holy Grail, Agile. It's been there for over 20 years ago, consolidated on some mountaintop in some ski resort in the USA, iterations, increments, MVP, retrospectives. It sounds great, and being a practitioner myself, it actually is great. But the question is, if you're thinking about the bigger picture, does it provide a higher quality faster? Well, according to the Standish Scales report, when you would compare an agile project with a standard waterfall or V model project, the overall quality in terms of full delivery and in terms of timing is even slightly better in a waterfall or V model approach. So Agile is delivering the full solution slower and also at a higher cost. Now, I'm not saying Agile is bad. Please be careful about that because it has a lot of benefits. It has fast updates, it has feedback loops, it increases retention. All of this is great. But in terms of improving quality, it's not a great choice. So no Agile for quality improvement. Let's try the next one. Let's go for test automation. Because we all know you can't do nowadays testing or quality assurance anymore without proper test automation. If you are embarking on a test automation journey, please be aware that according to the study by Kumar and Mishra, test automation has a very limited positive effect of cost. So test automation can have a positive effect of cost reduction. Test automation also has a limited positive effect on time. Your test execution, but also your test creation can be decreased by automating things. But on the other hand, test automation has a negative effect of quality on the amount of defects found. This is because of the pesticide paradox, and this is also because it's so damn hard, or at least harder than neglecting them, to try to debug a failing scenario. If a test scenario fails, automated, it's quite likely that that scenario is just removed from the test repository instead of trying to find out what went wrong. So you will find less new defects with test automation. So when it comes down to improving quality in terms of reducing amount of defects in production, test automation is not your biggest candidate to improve that quality. It might limited positively affect cost and time, however. So no agile, no test automation. Okay, another idea. Let's go for static typing. Now, if you have undertaken some IT studies, static typing is something that might sound very familiar. What is static typing? A static type language is where variables and variable types are known at compilation time. They can't change. Languages like Java, C, C++, C Sharp practice static typing. You declare something as a string or as an integer, and it cannot change once it's been compiled. On the other hand, you have dynamic type languages. There, your variables and your variable types are defined during runtime, though they can alter. Typical examples there are Ruby, are Python, PHP, typical more on the scripting side. Now, the advantage, and that is what academia has claimed for a long time, is that static typing, because these variables are known prior to compilation, is that static typing prevents type errors, declaring an integer to a boolean or to a double to a string. So it prevents those type errors to transform into runtime errors. Now, universities and academia have claimed for decades that static typing can result or will result in more qualitative code. However, a study 2014 by Ray et al. Showed that it makes absolutely no difference. Of course, if you apply static typing, you avoid some type defects, but static typing languages have other disadvantages, resulting in an equal amount of defects found. So you're interchanging one type of defect for the other, and the choice of your development model or your development language has no effect on the overall quality. So maybe we can find our holy grail in coding standards and templates, because that is what most organizations do. If you have novice developers, we go for coding standards. This is how we write code. This is how we document code. This is the maintainability template of our coding. This is what we use. Well, unlike you might expect, a study by Bogert has shown that coding standards have actually a negative effect on software quality. The moment you force developers to use certain code standards and templates, they lose kind of responsibility for certain code. They have to twist themselves into some body that they can't really fit in, and they're creating more defects you would have expected. Of course, the code looks fancier, the code looks nicer, the code looks more consistent and coherent, but in the insides of the code, the actual nomination of the code is worse. So coding standards have a negative effect on software quality. So if all of the above does not work, things that industry and academia have claimed for years, what does have a positively effect on software quality? The only hard technical skill that really improves software quality is code review. Well, in fact, any form of reviewing, whether it's code or requirements or any other form of documentation. This is shown by a study by Jones. In fact, it's every static technique that you can think of: static analysis, requirements reviewing, code reviewing, all that stuff will increase the quality of your end product. This will lower your development cost, so the total cost of development will decrease. It will also lower your testing costs because you will find less defects once you go to test or to production. And it will also lower your maintenance costs because of those less incidents found in production. The highest potential increase in quality is achieved when implementing inspections. Inspections are the most formal way of doing code reviews, where you assign different roles to different people to assess a document from different viewpoints, reading a certain document or code from the point of view of usability, from the point of view of performance, of security, as an end user, as a tester, as a developer, as a PO. And because if everybody looks with a different view to that model, you will get more defects found prior to going to development. So this is a very structured approach to code reviewing. If you imply this code reviewing, you will have a defect removal efficiency increase by more than 85%. So you will have avoided 85% of all defects slipping to unit testing, to system testing, to acceptance testing, or to production by 85%. Now you might wonder, why has this not been implemented before? Because this is not something new. In my bookshelf, I have a great book by Tom Gilp and Dorothy Graham called Software Inspections, and these claims were already made there, including all the data to prove them. We are talking about a book, Software Inspection, that dates back to 93. That is when To Unlimited had her hits, and that's most likely when most of you are probably not even born. So that reviews and inspections work should not be a surprise. What is not also not a surprise is that it's typically hard to convince your management of doing code reviewing. Why? Because when you do code reviewing, well, typically reviews and inspections will make you start coding later. And the first thing that somebody wants to do, wants to see is code and some implementation of code. And also because doing code reviews will make coding slower. And that's not typically what management or a product owner or scrum master want to see. If you have a developer, you want a developer to develop, write code, create code, craft software, not reading some things. But in the end, it pays back because it will result in faster delivery. Code reviewing inspections are also typically old-fashioned. It's very hard to envision that combined with an agile approach. It's considered expensive because you have all these people just reading, not creating things. And it's difficult also with agile, where the norm is fail fast and correct later on. But again, all these drawbacks are not compensating for all the positive effects of finding these defects earlier and avoiding 85% of all defects slipping through. So it's your task right now, if you're looking for a hard skill to improve quality, to convince your manager by doing this. So far in this talk, we have talked a lot on the technical or the harder side of software crafting. And it's not that these technical solutions don't help, but we're putting way too much emphasis on them, considering the decision on their usage as being critical for the project's success, while we have learned now that agile and automation, all that stuff, does not contribute to an improved quality or project success. Your project will not be more qualitative in terms of time and budget when working in agile, using coding standards, using static typing. That will not help. So let's try to dive a bit deeper and ask yourself some maybe strange questions. Question 1. Did you sleep or do you sleep less than 8 hours per night on average? Respond to that question for yourself. I know there's no interaction, but ask yourself, on your average week, do you sleep 8 hours per night or less? Question 2. Do you work typically more than 40 hours per week? Answer for yourself. Typical on my normal work week, do I work more than 40 hours per week business-wise? I'm not talking about chores you do at home, cooking, cleaning, business hours. And the third question is, are you currently unhappy with your job, your boss, or your colleagues? I let that sip in. Now, on these 3 questions, you have responded to those yourself. If you have 1 time yes, 2 times yes, or even worse, 3 times yes, then you are less able to deliver quality. And that is empirically proven. Let me go to the studies that show what I mean to say. Let's start by a study done by Fucci about sleep. What they did, Fucci and his fellows, they observed 45 programmers, software crafters, and they were practicing test-first development. Test-first development is a combination of test-driven development and reviewing. And what they were studying was the effect of ASD. ASD is acute sleep deprivation. That is, in layman's terms, doing an all-nighter. No sleep at all. So returning to work after nights out with the friends, went dancing or went out, a night of gaming or a night of trying to make code working right to make the deadline. From these 45 programmers, 23 did no or little sleep, 22 had a normal sleep pattern. From the group that did not sleep, there the researchers noticed a reduction of 50% in the quality of the implementation. So if you are a developer and you did not sleep, you lose 50% of the quality of your work. For the junior people, those who are less than 1 year of experience, the novice programmer, they seem to have lost even their basic technical skills. They were unable to compile things, to look up code, to do some inheritance, to do the basic stuff of development. That's what the effect of acute sleep deprivation, ASD, is. So if you have kids at home, very young kids that are sick or whatever, maybe it's best the next day to not go to work, because the only thing you will deliver is not quality products. A second study is about CSD. It's a study done by Rogers. Now, CSD is chronic sleep deprivation. That is not the same as ASD. ASD is on one moment, just one point in time. CSD is less abrupt. It's for a longer period of time. For example, you just became a proud parent, and typically the first weeks and the first months, you sleep less than normal. Or another example, in the rush to make a deadline, you open up your laptop every evening to finish the last sprint increments weeks after weeks. In summary, if your sleeping is less than 8 hours a day, for more than 1 week, it's already called CSD, or chronic sleep deprivation. Now, what did Rogers witness when observing professionals performing their duties with and without CSD? The amount of mistakes made by both teams, those with chronic sleep deprivation and those without chronic sleep deprivation, remained equal. So they made the same amount of mistakes. But the severity of the mistakes made by those with CSD increased exponentially. So if you are suffering from lack of sleep, if you're typically sleeping less than 8 hours a day, the severity of the mistakes that you make at work increases exponentially. You make the same amount of mistakes, but they're worse than other people who sleep well. And then finally, you also have something called the imposter syndrome. Because the imposter syndrome is that you don't realize that you have a problem. If you are sleep deprived, whether it's ASD or CSD, typically those people don't realize that they perform worse. And because you don't realize that you have a problem, you can't self-regulate. In certain environments, it's even cool to say, hey, I did an all night, or I worked all night, or I came right from the club over here and I'm ready to go. Yeah. And with tons of coffee, you can manage, or with Red Bull or whatever, you can manage. But you don't see the problem that you're less productive. And in fact, other people will have to compensate for the mistakes that you're making. So if you want to improve quality of your software, sleep is one of your biggest points to address, making sure you or the employees that you steer have sufficient sleep. That's tip 1. Tip 2, if you work full-time, or at least in Belgium where I'm coming from, a work week lasts typically 40 hours, consisting of 5 days with 8 hours of work per day. Great, you might say, that's 8 hours of productive work. However, employees, people can't be productive for 8 hours in a row, especially not when it comes down to sapient, non-repetitive work. You have interruptions, you have phone calls, you have Team, you have Slack, you have emails, and meetings, an avalanche of meetings, 2 avalanches of meetings. So, and then you have colleagues telling stories about kids and their pets, or about both. All of these things require context switching and decreases productivity. For sapient, non-repetitive work, so thought processes, writing test cases, executing test cases, writing code, doing business analysis, creating architecture, you have a maximum of 40 hours and 40 minutes per day that you can remain focused. After that, your productivity and your quality drops. From the study by Colbert and Sauerman, it shows that with every additional hour above these 4 hours and 40 minutes, your productivity drops further with an additional minus 12%. So it's a great idea to have regular stops at the coffee machine, to not take your lunch in front of your laptop, because it will decrease your productivity and your quality. Overtime, great solution. The ideal solution to finish a job which is almost 99% ready. Well, bummer, overtime is not increasing your productivity. In fact, overtime decreases your productivity. If you typically work 40 hours per week, you lose 80% of your productivity. It's not that you're 80% productive. No, you lose 80%, so you're only 20% productive. And even though you're just 20% being productive for these extra hours, it also has a negative effect on your personal life and your work-life balance. So overtime is one of the biggest mistakes people make when trying to achieve quality when delivering on time, especially in agile teams where velocity is measured, because your velocity is determined by number of story points delivered per week. So every time you do overtime, your velocity, your estimated velocity for the next sprint also increase. So overtime then becomes the next standard. So be smart, don't try to do overtime, except when in exceptional cases. A funny thing that I deserved in my years in IT, when we were racing to make the deadline, people were always asked to work more and longer or more efficient. It almost never happened that scope was reduced. A study by Tozur observed two teams of similar size, similar seniority, and similar projects. And between those teams, in order to make the deadline, Team A did overtime, while Team B was reducing the scope. When they investigated the results, Team A, the one that was doing overtime, performed worse on every aspect that you can consider quality. They delivered the total product too late and with more defects than Team B. Team B was just reducing scope. They worked 40 hours a week. The rest was working more. And when people were asked to join for the next project, the Team B members said, yeah, of course, let's go. Team A members, most of them was looking for a new job. So overtime is in fact decreasing your quality and is also demotivating your people. Again, overtime does not work. When it comes down to your mental health, also stress is an important factor to influence the quality of software. You might think, okay, Michael, but how can stress now influence software quality? Well, when employees indicate that they experience stress, this is observed to have two parallel negative consequences. First of all, their work is less productive. They are going to deliver less in the same amount of time. Second, they make significantly more serious mistakes. So they make more mistakes for the same amount of work. So if you don't resolve the stress factor of your employees, putting too much tension on them, asking too much to work overtime, not giving them breaks, all kind of that stuff, then this becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Well, stress levels will rise, they become less productive, and then you have countermeasures. So if you want to have good employees, make sure that they are as little stressed as possible. On the other side, happiness increases software quality. If you typically wonder why these innovative companies have ping pong tables and yoga and Pilates zones and great coffee and sushi bars, this is exactly why. A study by Grazichian shows that developers that indicate that they are happy are able to solve complex problems faster and with less defects than their colleagues who feel less happy. So if you have a ping pong table or a pool table or some video games, enjoy that. It will make your life better and you will be happier. And because you're happier, you will produce better quality of software. Now, combining all of this, if we revert back to the assignment I gave you in the beginning, you're in the lead. You are in the driver's seat. You have carte blanche. You can choose to implement any of these things, more resources, agile, SecOps, AI, modeling, pair programming, static techniques. What would you invest in? Would you go for the hard skills, the ones mentioned on the slide here? Or would you go for allowing people to have more sleep, less stress, a normal workload, and then going for better quality of software? You're there now. You have the information. You have the studies. It's up to you to make the right choice. That's it from my side. I want to thank you for spending the time with me and to listening to my story. Feel free to reach out. If you have any questions right now, please put them in the chat. If there are other questions that you might have, feel free to contact me. You have my contact details right there. The QR code is to my LinkedIn profile. Feel free to connect. I'm open to any kind of questions you might have.
Okay, thank you so much, Michael. We just had some comments in the chat that they weren't sure if they can interact, so we'll wait a couple minutes. But I already got a question that I thought was really interesting. You mentioned like the recurring cycle of hype and disappointment. So what would you say is the current silver bullet in testing that will follow that same path next?
Now you're touching my pet peeve. I think a lot of organizations are focusing a lot on the benefits of using AI for test case generation and for code
Of
generation,
course.
the so-called vibe testing and vibe coding. I have to admit it gives some potential benefits because you get test cases quite fast and they're good. They're not excellent, they're good. They're 80% correct, 85% correct. Because what organizations typically forget is that things like ChatGPT and Copilot, they are LLMs, they are language models. They're based on stochastic variables of language. They just put one word in a statistical order after the other. If you
Right.
ask ChatGPT 3 times, what is 4.4, 4 plus 4, the first time it's 8. The second time, if you ask, are you sure, it's 8. If you then threaten ChatGPT and ask, I'm certain it's 9. If you don't say it's 9 and go to Copilot, it will answer 4 plus 4 is 9. So if you use this kind of model for your test case generation, things might appear to be very well, but under the surface, there will be hallucinations and problems. So criticize, as I said, criticize the solutions there. So a lot of organizations are investing a lot in AI for improving testing. I think it's a great idea that at least organizations are now aware that they should do some testing and QA, but just be critical regarding the output of these kinds of tools.
Okay, very good. You also shared a lot of like empirical research, which I thought was really interesting. And I was wondering, you kind of gave us like a lot of things that companies could do. Could you share one thing that is like super low effort and high impact that a team could like change next week and it would help improve like their would help improve their team?
The first thing I would do is make sure the team feel comfortable and happy, whether it is by
Mhm.
sleeping more or not allowing them to do overtime or respecting their boundaries or providing a safe environment where there's free coffee or fruit or whatever. It depends on what the team wants because I cannot extrapolate my situation here in Belgium to anywhere in the world,
Right.
depending on where you work. It will be different in a startup than compared to a big organization or whether you work in daily renewable software versus a product lifecycle of 1 year. So it really depends on the team. As I said before, for me, the biggest concern is doing overtime. If you
Right.
continuously do overtime because you always have to make the deadline, it will decrease your quality of life, both professionally and personally. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that you will have to do overtime more and more and more. So you're just lying to yourself. If that's one tip, one silver bullet, stop doing overtime.
Okay, a good one. And the last question, a personal one. You mentioned a lot of research. Was there one type of data point where that you encountered while reading that research where you were like most surprised or that you didn't know?
I was most surprised by the study regarding test automation. I
Okay.
had high hopes because a lot of organizations have invested so much time and so much money in selecting the right test automation tools, setting up test automation frameworks and strategies and architecture, converting manual tests to automated tests, Doing continuous research, there are so many conferences talking about nothing but test automation. And if you then realize, based on actual numbers and study, that it has a very limited effect on lower cost and a very limited effect on timing, and even has a negative effect on overall quality because we focus sometimes too much on automation, that was for me an eye opener. I think if you want to compose a test strategy or a test vision or a test approach, it should always have a balance for repetitive work, typically the regression test or configuration test, which are excellent candidates for automation, especially on a unit level or an API level, but also for sapiens, if you want manual testing, where creativity and a critical and analytical mindset is key. I think that for me was the eye opener.
Okay, Michael, thank you so much. We just got a comment saying great insight. I think I couldn't agree more. So thank you so much for being here. For everyone watching, please vote for Michael on the A4Q Testing Summit website. And stay tuned because we have a lot of great presentations prepared for you. Michael, thank you so much. It was so great listening to you, and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Have a great day. Bye.
Software testers. Move beyond theory and master testing with the AI-powered ISTQB add-on Practical Tester by A4Q program. The ISTQB add-on Practical Tester by A4Q equips you with the theoretical skills and practical competence to truly excel. Learn how to apply black box testing like a pro. Estimate accurately, write flawless defect reports, and catch issues early. The ISTQB add-on Practical Tester by A4Q complements your ISTQB certification by turning knowledge into powerful action. Visit our websites and find out more information.